everyone for calling in today. We're incredibly excited to have you join us. My name is Katie. I'm the Chief Program Officer for the Chapman Foundation for Caring Communities. And co-leading with me today as the concierge is Lainey. And Lainey is the Content Quality and Logistics Specialist here at the Foundation as well. And we are really looking forward to being able to have our very first panel discussion within our Courageous Leader series. And for those of you who've already attended our first two sessions, we had one where we talked about building trust in teams. What are concrete 8 trust building behaviors that we as leaders can focus on? And we also held a session on leading in an ever-changing world. How can we support the people in our span of care as they navigate change within the workplace? For those of you who are not able to attend or are doing it at your own pace, Lainey's going to go ahead and drop in the chat both of those recording links for you. So if you want to go back and listen to them for some additional context, please feel free to do that. For today, we have 3 members that are serving on our panel to talk about how they've taken the information that they've learned about trust and probably from a lot of experiences that they've gained over the years and share with us about how they're working to build trust effectively in their teams. And as I move into introducing our panel today, you'll find that all 3 of them have completed each of our foundational courses. So they've all had an opportunity to go through listens where we really talk about that one-to-one relationship and communication skills. They've also attended serves where we spend time focusing on developing service mindsets and behaviors that help us shift work cultures from a me-centric approach to a we-centric approach. And all 3 completed our final Our Community Transforms program, where we really focus at that higher level of systematic change when it comes to creating environments where team members really feel valued and like they can flourish. So with us today, I'd like to first introduce you to Colonel Matthew Robbins. He's the 127th Operations Group Commander for the Michigan Air National Guard. Matt's call sign is Fumble, so you may hear a few of us refer to him in different terminology, but Fumble, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely, thank you.
We also have with us Bev Beal, who is the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity of Kent County, Michigan. Bev, we're really excited to have you.
Thank you, super excited to be here.
And Jamie Banstra, who is the Principal and Director at the West Shore ESD, located over in Ludington, Michigan. Jamie, thanks for making the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And we chose to pick our very first topic to be on trust because we are seeing it come up over and over again in the current research that's showing the impact that it's having in the workplace. So if you look at some of these statistics, it would show that only 23% of US employees strongly agree that they actually have trust in the very people that are leading their organization. 65% said that they would rather see their boss get fired than receive a pay raise. We're also seeing that these levels of trust are having a really direct impact, not only on employees' sense of belonging, but also on their amount of daily effort that they put forth in their roles. So I don't think that we could overestimate how critically important it is for us to be having some dialogue and conversation around trust. So for the first question for the panel, we would like to just hear a little bit more about your organization's journey in building trust. And for you specifically, what are some behaviors and mindsets that you focused on to make trust a key component in your culture? Bev, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure. So it's been super important for Habitat to get the majority of our folks through listens so that we could first really understand how we communicate and how others might communicate around us. And then really pulling further to go through serves was really taking that from me to we. And I think that's really where our behaviors and mindsets began to change around when we're at work. And it really is a we. And so how do we build trust? How do we have open communication? And how are we listening to others really to understand the support they need? So when I look at the slides that you presented earlier, we oftentimes hear that our leadership team is not supporting reports throughout the organization. And so better understanding and spending time really talking about what our weaknesses are, what our expectations are, and where accountability lies. And so our team so far, the majority of them have learned that through listens and serves. And so those few of us that have gone through transforms now are really taking that coaching culture and trying to say, how are we pulling it out of individuals, knowing that these hard conversations, or knowing how folks want to be spoken to and spoken with, really begin in understanding me, and then translating that focus from them to organizational, goals and visions. So we use multiple methods here, but I think really for us, it's really saying, how do we build that trust by listening and asking and hearing when folks need help or need support?
Bev, I love that pause to make sure that you're really getting to truly know your team members well, so that when you are listening, you know how to kind of tailor it to their approach.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Fumble, I'd like to kick this question over your way.
Yeah, you bet. So I took my leadership position here in Michigan about 4 years ago. And our journey with me and Jody Nitz, who hopefully some of our listeners have met before as well, we began our journey trying to build more trust in our organization after we went through our community listens and serves and transforms together. I think the reason why is that anybody that's in the military has learned the amount of people who are both eligible and willing to serve continues to shrink, and so the ability to retain these superhumans that we love has become really important and very difficult. The demands on their lives, particularly as a guardsman, where they have their families and their civilian job, and then of course all the immense demands that we place on them. It's crucial for us to learn more about how we can serve them and help let them serve us as well. And so we're really fortunate that we've had the opportunity to take those classes and bring those classes back into the Michigan Guard, and share that with other states. We hope to have that opportunity. It'll probably come up later, but I've learned probably the hard way that what got you here isn't going to be what keeps you here, and certainly believe that doing things like this and focusing on the we is what it's going to take to help keep us strong.
Fumble, I appreciate you really talking about our need to consistently be reviewing what's working and what's not working within our organizations, and just kind of that focus on changing with the landscape as well. Thank you. Jamie, what could you add to this?
Well, I appreciated what Bev shared when she talked about just the connection of the listens work and the serves. I think those were I think learning about those things was really helpful for me as a leader, but also I think the people in our organization, to help them become aware of those different ideas, especially I would say listens, where you're really focusing on that self-awareness and then the awareness of others, because we're working together in organizations. And so if we're going to build trust, we need to understand each other. And so I think for me, when I think about, that starting point, when I came in, it was just really as a leader trying to listen. And actually, I told people that, hey, I'm willing to connect with you at the coffee shop or wherever in the summer prior to me starting. And I had quite a few people take me up on that. And it was just a conversation to get to know them and to hear what's on their mind. And it was kind of crazy. We talk about listening, but when you really start to listen, then you start to hear what's really going on. Like, what are the issues and what are the things? And I think that's also part of it, is showing them that you're listening by kind of bringing that back. And in a listening conversation, right, we kind of reply and check. But I think in an organization as leaders, we still have those kinds of responsibilities where we hear and then we come back and we say, hey, this is what I heard you saying, and this is kind of the stuff we need to move forward with. And so I think it started there. I think also a really interesting kind of thing that happened when I first started was we had a situation, and it had nothing to do with me, but I said to them, this next fall, this will not be like this. And I can remember them like looking at me like, yeah, whatever. And I was blown away. I was like, are you serious? Like I had to like adjust my thinking, because I was like, it wasn't personal, but it was how they felt about kind of the way things maybe had been in the past or what they expected from people. So when I said something was going to be different, they really didn't trust that. And so I think, you know, the way we build trust, the way I started to work on building trust is just through the basic behaviors. I mean, again, of building relationships, of doing what you say you're going to do. That becomes huge as a leader. I think seeing things through, not just starting something, but seeing it all the way through. They start to see that they can trust and rely on you. I think also one comment came up one time. I worked with a coordinator group, and we use a project management system to kind of organize our work. And in our meetings, we'll talk to each other. We'll talk things through, but at the end, it's like actionable steps and who's going to do it, right? And then the next meeting, we would come back to those things and kind of, you know, consistently come back to them. And it became a very, I guess, what you started to see. One of them said to me one time, like, they were kind of blown away by the fact that we came back to things and carried things out. And so again, I think there's a lot of things there. It's powerful, and what we learn through listens is huge, but then translating that into real behaviors can be challenging.
Jamie, I appreciate that. When I hear all three of you, kind of that common theme of making sure that you really get to know the individual, right? The unique needs and situations of everyone. And Jamie, your comment about really turning it into concrete behaviors was really what drove us to add this whole section on the 8 management behaviors that foster trust within an organization. Regardless of where your team is at, you are either working on maintaining trust, building trust, or sometimes we walk into a leadership role where we are charged with rebuilding trust. And Jamie, your point of, even if you weren't the leader to break the trust in the past, people can be a little bit apprehensive or untrusting when they are kind of feeling out a new leader. So I just want to do a quick high-level review of the 8 that were covered. Again, if you were not on the session before, Lainey's got the link right in the chat for you to listen to later. But these were 8 of the behaviors, and by no means an exclusive list, but 8 behaviors that we really try to focus on throughout the content. And one is this heavy focus on recognizing excellence. How are you pointing out the things that your team members are doing really well? We walk through how to induce challenge stress. And this is that artful dance where you are creating enough of a growth opportunity that it challenges your team members without being unrealistic or overwhelming them. We talk more in detail in that training about how to give people discretion in how they do their work. Maybe you don't have room to wiggle on the end product that has to come out of it, but where are the spaces that you can empower them to make some choices? And that aligns closely with this concept of enabling job crafting. How are they able to help shape the very work that they do? Then we talk about sharing information broadly. There are a lot of things that we as leaders know that are happening within the organization, and how are we being intentional about sharing that story wide throughout the organization? And you probably heard the theme from all 3 of our panel members, this focus on intentionally building relationships. We can get really caught up in the day-to-day tasks and the putting out of fires. How are we making space to really model this? And as we start to learn more about the very people that we lead, we have an opportunity to facilitate whole person growth, not just focused on what are you doing for me or what are you doing for the organization, but how can we support you and what you have going on in your life and in your goals. And the final one was showing vulnerability. As leaders, how can we really set that tone so that they can see that we don't think that we're perfect, that we don't have all of the answers, and how can modeling that have an impact on the trust level in your teams? And I'm sure that all 3 of you, Fumble, Jamie, and Bev, remembered those flawlessly from the time that you had class before. But it's not always easy, right? There's the concept on the slide, and then we know that there are challenges that happen along the way. And so for this one, Fumble, I'd love to kick it to you first. What are some of the challenges that you faced with trust in your organization?
Yeah, you bet. I'd like to attack that kind of 2 ways. One with the organizational challenge and how I've tried to be a better part of that, and then also the personal one of like what challenges have I faced in actually practicing these behaviors. So the first one, and this is true everywhere. I'm probably going to use military jargon, and I'm sorry if I do, but I think everybody has a boss, and so here in my role, I'm a boss of a group of people who are also a boss of a group of people, and so on. But I'm also a member of a team. And so the mindset that I've taken of kind of dealing with those two of how do I be a trusted member of a team of my peers and build trust with my boss, and at the same time turn that internal to my organization, my inside team, and I've tried to face that really with the intentional relationships of and showing vulnerability. That's not easy to do with the people that are in your span of care, and I think it's much harder to do that with people you are in their care of like, hey, I'm failing at the job you've asked me to do. So I've tried to model that as much as possible. And when you talk about things competing for resources, for example, right, I want those for my organization so that we can do our mission or our job well. But sometimes I recognize that another one of my peers has that need, and I should be honest and build that trust with them of maybe giving up on the people in my care a little bit, and in order to ensure that our adjacent partners have it. So that's been one challenge. The other one, though, to kind of answer that question more, the internal, is as a leader, I have struggled mightily with that developing personal growth and job crafting. I kind of mentioned it earlier in that, what gets you here isn't what keeps you here. And it's taken me a long time as a leader to learn that, and to remember that that there's people out there that do the job I used to do way better than I ever could have thought of doing it. I'm not a squadron commander anymore. I have amazing people that can do that. And remembering that they're amazing at that and telling them about that, I do that. But that's challenging, and I got to constantly reflect on that and remember, to build that discretion for them to go and succeed the way that they do and that they can. And I think that's had huge payoffs. But it's unnatural, as a micromanager or type A, or all those things that you learn about yourself, and our community listens, taking that and then turning it to good, I think will always be a challenge.
Fumble, two things. One, I really like how you call out, especially when you start supervising people that used to be in that same space that you were, hard letting go of your own ideas or thoughts in that way, and really leaning into letting people make it their own, I think is a great reminder. On top of, regardless of what role we're in, we're playing different roles with that trust building, whether it be, as you mentioned, across teams or up towards our supervisor or outward towards the people that we're caring for in our span of care. It's a great reminder. Jamie, what would you add?
Well, as I answered the last question, I think about some of the challenges, and some of those challenges, Katie, you mentioned, you're spot on, was the fact of stepping into a role where maybe people were feeling a lack of trust. And that wasn't necessarily because the person before me wasn't a great person. I think a lot of times we've had a lot of transition in our organization prior to me. And so they had a number of leaders over a short period of time. And I think that's one of the challenges then that I faced, was to kind of build that idea that they could trust what I was going to do and what I said, and even just being there for the long haul. So I think going back to that last question too, some of those mindsets were one of the ways that we, really tried to kind of think about how to address those. So Fumble was talking about the idea of being a leader, right? And or the idea of having a boss. And I think one of the things too with trust is, that idea of that collaborative decision-making, that they know that, yes, there are people that are going to play different roles in the organization, whether they're, supervisors or whatever those are, but we're going to listen to each other and we're going to work out, develop solutions together. I think that's a huge thing. The other one would be mutual accountability, that we're, and I think Bev mentioned that with the we versus me, that we have mutual accountability to each other. Also care and support, just the idea of like, it's that balance between accountability to each other and also caring and supporting each other. And I think in organization, we're constantly trying to do that. And then I think the last one would be communication, the idea of how we communicate with each other effectively. And so I think one of the challenges, that comes when trust isn't there, is that some of those behaviors I just mentioned, they're not existent. And so you're building a culture of those things, right? You're kind of saying, when I came in, the challenge was a culture that didn't have trust, but it didn't have a lot of those things I just mentioned. So how do we build a culture? And so those are the kinds of things that we stressed and modeled. And I think that open communication is huge, because I think that really is such a big part of building that trust and that culture. So.
Jamie, I appreciate that. And when you first started speaking about, especially organizations that experience a lot of change, whether that be turnover or changes in processes or procedures or whatever that might look like, as a leader looking at, it sounds like, what do I have control over, which is how I show up, and do I follow through on the commitments that I make? Thank you. Bev.
This is so fun. I've learned so much. So, as the leader, right? Like, I am the boss here. And so I personally face a lot of challenges, because OCL is important to me, serves is important to me, and transforms is super important to me. But I have to keep showing up and making sure. So just in a leadership meeting today, I said, Gail's really good at getting people out of the box. And my leadership team kind of cocked their head and said, out of the box. And I was like, ugh. So I know that in most organizations, and I think both Jamie and Matt have referenced it, there's a level of leadership, and then there's everybody else there. And there's that constant pointing at leadership and saying, they're not being supportive, they're not hearing me. And when you are the leader and you have that separation between layers, and it's so important to be out and about and talking to folks and building the relationships, but it's also every single time you're in that space, like making sure communication is going both ways. Oftentimes I feel like when we're trying to build these relationships, we're trying to become a friend or a mentor or whatever, but like, it's that listening to the need of the individual and focusing on, not that I need to have you say hi to me and smile at me and ask me how Ty's doing, but rather that you can come to me and share whatever it is you feel like you need to share, focused on organizational growth. And as an organization that's going through a ton of change on how we do what we do, there are often times that our team feels uncommunicated to. And you sit in this space as a leader of, how much do I communicate and how much do I not communicate? And when I over communicate, what happens? And so I would urge folks who are listening that are sitting at all levels of leadership to really focus in on that piece of knowing your folks and knowing what they need to hear more about. And that might be super individual. But I think we at Habitat have started to really use like the FBI, like, this is how I'm feeling when this happens, and this is the impact it has on the organization. And it's awkward and bumpy and feels right out of a textbook. But for us, that challenge of, we can't have a separation between leadership and associate. We have to all be working together. And so I'm certain that happens in every organization, but it takes everyone in the organization to work on these skills and agree that they're important. And it really starts at the leadership team. And so today I can't do this myself. I can't do this without you. And without having that open and honest conversation among your teams, that this isn't going to work unless we're all in. It's just those constant reminders. So I'm hopeful that nobody's looking at all three of us like we got this all figured out, because I think we've all just told you we don't. But it's staying focused on what our folks need and that support they need.
Bev, I think it's a great reminder too. I think sometimes we talk about these skills and the assumption is, as long as we do it, then our organization doesn't have the same problems. And I think what we've learned is that organizations will continue to have tensions around clear communication and tensions around, am I really being heard and valued and appreciated? But what this common language does is it gives us some tools of how to have conversation about it. So maybe instead of, it sounds like people getting really resentful and upset, they have the skills to deliver that effective confrontation using the FBI model. And it's just a great reminder. Thank you.
Yep.
I will say that I have one more question that I'd like to ask our panel, but would encourage everyone who's listening right now. In the meantime, please start dropping any questions that you want to pose to the panel in the chat. As soon as we get done with this next one, we'll open it up to have some additional questions. But I think even though we've talked about some of the challenges that make it hard to focus on building trust in an organization, we can't argue with the research that shows there's a huge benefit that comes from really investing the time and making that happen. And I think, Jamie, I think it was you that talked a little bit about both this element of how do we balance caring for people and that accountability around we're still held responsible for performance. And when you look at some of these stats, we're seeing the results hitting in both areas when you have high trust organizations. You see that people feel closer relationships with their colleagues, more aligned with the company's purpose. There's more enjoyment, less burnout. And from a performance standpoint, you are seeing a 50% higher productivity. 106% felt like they had more energy when they walked into the workplace. So I think it again just goes to show that despite the challenges, the commitment as leaders to really focus on investing in that space is beneficial. For this one, we'd love to hear from the panel. What are some tangible ways that you've seen your organization or team improve based on you really focusing on trust? And for this one, Jamie, do you mind kicking us off?
No, it'd be great. I really loved what Bev was talking about at the end of that, is just that communication. And I think that's a great example when we start to see changes in organizations connected to trust. I think one of those areas is communication, people's willingness to open and honestly communicate. And we're seeing that in, meeting settings where people will be honest with each other and feel safe in doing that, and people not being offended by that honesty. Bev referred to that FBI and just being able, again, to clearly communicate with each other and to hear each other out. And also, I think when we talk about being productive as organizations, one of the things research shows is the idea of us being able to really dig into things together and have honest dialogue, and then choose a direction together. And so I think we're seeing that we're more able to do that. I also, one of the things examples that came to mind was I had a couple of teachers that had the opportunity to transition, basically to blend their two classes together into one. It was a mechatronics and a welding, and they started talking about a design, fabrication, and welding class. And it was really a whole transformation of their class, and they were looking at doing that for the benefit of students. And in that situation, it was the spring, and it was a heavy lift to get that going for the fall. But they trusted, you could see they trusted leadership, they trusted their colleagues, they trusted the process, and so they made the decision to do that, and it was really cool to see. So I think those are tangible ways that you start to see trust playing out, where people are willing to take risks and those kinds of things. And so one other one that comes to mind is even just with the listens training. We did the listens training at the end of the year. We did a couple-day retreat. This was at the end of last year. And when we first started talking about that, like in January of last year, people were like, oh my goodness, like the idea of going away and being together and hanging out outside of work was a real transition. And so, but they went, they loved it. And then this year we're going to go do the serves in the same way. And what was really cool is just, you can tell, again, going back to that question of how trust is improved, they're like super geeked up and excited about that. And again, part of it is about the serves training, but part of it is just the idea of being willing to step outside of work environments and hang out and go off campus and go do that kind of thing. And so I think those are great examples of how we're seeing trust play out differently.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jamie. Bev.
I don't even know if I can match that. That's awesome. The energy piece, I think, is really where it begins, right? So for us, I would say we have great team focus, and we have great departments working together. Once we can pull that thread through the organization, I think we'll be super successful. So as teams, I'm confident that when our teams meet once a week, we use an operating system that requires us to have 90-minute meetings, and we're really focused on getting through issues and really getting what we call rocks done. And so I think the way that we've blended this with listens particularly and now serves is we've really got trust within teams. So open and honest conversation can happen. I just came out of my weekly meeting, and so there are a couple of things that could have been bumpy, but we're okay. We're not trying to do anything. Like, it's just where we would have spent time on feelings, we're just now focused on this wasn't intentional. This was how we are solving this issue. And now you've called to our attention how we need to make sure we're communicating that to you so that you're not getting caught up in like a feeling. And I think that's really super important because each person on your team needs to be communicated. And when we're in our team meetings, focusing on that. Pulling that thread through the organization has been a struggle for us because so much change is happening. But I think it's all around building that culture where focusing on the fact that the idea that you bring forward, no matter what place you bring that forward, is important to the organization. And when you keep that idea, that thought, that comment silent and to yourself, it's not showing your trust in the organization or that you feel that thought's being trusted by us. So I think where we've really been focused and how we've accomplished this is really documenting successes that we've had as an organization. And as we've documented, here's what we accomplished in 1 year, pulling in words like trust, pulling in words like communication. How does this feel? How did it feel when you heard it as a thought, and how does it feel as success? It's just kind of pulling that through the organization. I think every time you have a new member of an organization, you're kind of going back to ground zero. So I think we just need to remember that this is just an ongoing focus and culture.
Bev, I love that tie, or that reminder that it has to be a continual conversation. And when you were talking about your team meeting, it almost sounds like because of the high level of trust, it's less about questioning the motives of what's being said and more able to slip into that assuming positive intent.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I need to write that down.
Tumble, what can you add here?
It's funny, I had an answer, but based on what Bev just said about the new people, you learn something new every day, and that's the one that I had to relearn to not forget that it is a constant, infinite game, to keep building this one. But what I was thinking the most about with this, I find it difficult to define tangible when it comes to the emotional intelligence that these classes have taught us. But I hope to do that more by just kind of describing some of the things I've done and then what I've seen, even if they might not have necessarily tangible results. I'm sure they're out there, but one of the things that I tried to do over the last year or so was that I was in control of was just reducing my demand signal for details, because it probably still is higher than folks necessarily want it, but really focusing on trying to limit that a little bit. And again, let my circle of care, if you will, subordinates and direct reports, go solve their problems, and then come to me for help. That's the end result that I really wanted. And so by stopping the demand signal for routine updates on metrics and readiness reporting and some of the things that are like innate to what we do, I think I've started to actually get more details by not asking for them, because now the team has figured out on their own what's really important and what their thresholds or signals are that they're looking for to know that there's a problem. And I feel like that's been a big victory, to the point where now I can focus more on the big picture, the up and out outside of, in this case, my group, and the squadrons can focus on their squadron up and out problems, to the point now where I hear more victories about what they're doing that I don't necessarily have all the details for, and that feels like a more right way. And I think it indicates there's some trust there that they can go, when I say they, the team leaders in my care can go and find the problems that they see are the closest rocks or alligators to their boat, and then let me know whenever they're in trouble. And I've seen that have a better impact. And I've tried to do that by more reflective listening when they bring me those problems, so that they can solve them. And that was a skill that I don't think I could have put my finger on before going through the classes. You know, despite having been a group commander for 2 years before I ever really understood how to do that key kindergarten skill, as I say, I was awful at it. And putting that into use, I think, has seen tenfold results from the people that I work with. The other one that I've done though is that when there really is like you remember the video where there's like a nail in the forehead between the husband and wife, and like sometimes there really is a nail in somebody's forehead, and they come and like, hey, I have this problem and I need you to solve it. And when they do, I've tried to drop everything that I have going on and solve that. And I think the tangible outcome of that is that now when there really is something that needs, my attention, if you will, that they'll bring it to me. I don't need to go look for those problems. It'll land while there's still time to take action on it. I think that's key. One of the things I was recently read about, like the enemies of trust, and by when people do bring that to you and you give a platitude or like, yeah, sure, it's the most important thing. I think maybe Jamie mentioned that too, that like if you don't follow up on that, then that just erodes trust. So I assume that when people come to me and say, Fumble, I need your help on this, that as long as I'm able to help, or say like, hey, sorry, this sounds awful and I'm here to help you or listen to it, but we can't, we're not gonna be able to provide the solution that you're really looking for. Just that honesty, I think is going to go a long way.
I appreciate the amount of trust that probably gets built with you giving that responsible freedom for your team members, but also I would imagine another outcome is just a tremendous amount of growth and development when you are trusting them in that space.
I hope so. I hope it's as hard for them as it is for me, and I'm sure that it is. But yeah, it's not easy doing that.
So now we get to a little bit of the improv part of our session, where we're going to take some questions from the chat. And Lainey and Heather, I'm going to do my best to capture all of these, but if for some reason I miss one, please feel free to just come off mute and chime in. But we have a question from Kayla about how long does it normally take to build trust within teams and organizations after it's been broken? And any of you three are welcome to jump in.
Boy, after it's been broken, huh? I feel like that's going to be a case-by-case one, but I don't know that there's a great answer to that. I thought you were going with how long does it take to build a team when you join a team, and I forever. But boy, once it's broken, I think you're on that train track for a while. But that's no answer, Kayla. I'm sorry. I don't have a good, solid, concrete one.
I feel like a lot of that, though, is what kind of, Matt, what you said earlier, too. And I think when we can break trust without even knowing that we've broken trust. So, to know that it's broken, right? But I would say one of my biggest, the things that I have to watch what I do is, I think I walked away from serves going, there's a couple of things. I walked away from listens being like, whew, I'm a D, I get it now. I know I'm so tired. I walked away from serves in that same respect, other than making sure that people know expectations up front really makes trust happen. And so once the expectation is, we're going to have this financing model for how we sell our houses in 2025 done, and you hand off that project and you hand off that project, you've given them the expectation, but you haven't given them the pathway. Like, that's how you build trust. And so once it's broken, it's finding what part of that pathway to someone's success was broken. Was it when you went back in and said, well, you're not doing this right, or whatever it was? So I think there's so many times that trust is broken on every single day. But if it's by the leader, then the leader, spends time finding that place where trust was broken, and it becomes what you do. And oftentimes we think that that's like the work off the side of your desk, but it's the work that you have to do every day.
I would say too, just, like Fumble said, I think it's a hard question to answer definitively, but if you think about implementation timelines, usually implementing a new initiative is like 3 to 5 years to go from where you are to get to where you want to be. And so I would kind of think that trust would be similar, that it's probably longer than what we anticipate. And I think that would just be something to think about. Sometimes we think it's going to just happen overnight, and it probably isn't. And so, and going back to the experience that I've had in the current situation I'm in, I would say that's fairly accurate, is that 3 to 5 years, because I'm in finishing up year 3 right now. And I would say that I think the culture has changed significantly, but it's taken several years.
I think everyone on the line was hoping for done in 3 weeks. Quick fix would have been a great answer, I think, for many of us. But I appreciate the authenticity and honesty behind the responses. So thank you. All right, let's move on to the next one from Greg. And Greg, it's great to see you on the call. I did not get to see all the names from earlier on. So one of the hardest changes in organizations is in the health benefit offerings. When a self-funded employer takes control over their healthcare spend and offers different solutions to their employees, employees often initially feel like something is taken away, even when ultimately it's beneficial to them and their organization. So it talks about a big change within the health benefits. Any tips from you 3 to build trust when changing health benefits?
I'll jump in because we've had some situations like this, and I think part of it goes into continue. I think how the change rolls out. Again, communication and support in that process. Sometimes, I think a turnaround time that's reasonable. I mean, all those things can help. You're still going to have people that feel frustrated because they may not understand it, but I think giving them as much clarity as you can, walking alongside them in the process, and giving them a reasonable amount of time to make the transition. And then I think also continuing to listen for how those benefits work or don't work, and working with HR to continue to try to make sure that if there's something that's way out of whack, that you work to make the adjustments in the future.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie on that, the clarity, and recognizing too that like from your vantage point, it sounds like a great program, but there's always going to be somebody out there where it's going to rub them the wrong way. And the more transparent you are and the opportunity that you have to listen to what those needs are, it will probably go a long way to maintaining the trust, to where it may be abraded but not broken. It's probably the best way to go there. We've had to do that a couple of times in my career, both like DoD wide. We changed our entire retirement benefit plan of, hey, you serve for so long and move on, and we kind of got with the times and went more 401k, and to Jamie's point, the way they rolled that out, it was years of implementation, lots of buy-in briefings, and then selection periods where people this age don't get to choose. People a little older also don't get to choose. They have to stay in the old way, and it was a big to do. Because I think people are going to just make the assumption that that a benefits change is in the benefit of the big organization and not them. So yeah, good luck. But I would do what Jamie said: be careful and be transparent.
I've got nothing to add to that.
Great. Thank you all. And it does remind me of the very last session that we had on living in the ever-changing world. Greg, just that reminder that big emotional reaction from people is actually a very normal, healthy part of managing the change process, but it definitely does require us leaders making a lot more time to listen. So thank you for bringing that one up. All right, we have one from Natalie. How do you build, I think I might have skipped one. Sorry, everything was shifting on my screen at the same time. This one's from Stephanie. How do you balance the need for open communication within the team when rolling out change without overwhelming team members, but still maintaining transparency and allowing for processing time?
So we use a operating system here that our folks see a 1-year strategic plan and a 3-year focus. And so they see everything we're working on for the entire year. And it gets really, really mind-boggling when every quarter we have a conversation around it, because they're like, how close are we to this thing? And it really took one person to say, when you need to know, you'll know, and we're not going to keep you out of the loop. And so today we may not have the details on that, but when we do, you will know. And you can see how deeply embedded your department is in this decision or in this goal. And so you will know, but it's a constant conversation, because when there's so much change happening, ultimately we have to remember that we're only concerned about what that change means to me. How is my job going to change? Is my pay structure going to change? And who I'm reporting to going to change? Is my office going to change? Is my title going to change? And so we really have to make sure that we could keep that trust of these are conversations, these important big conversations will happen in private. But one of the things that we've done that has been hugely successful is we've pulled task forces in around big issues. And we've asked folks to volunteer for those task forces. So we haven't assigned someone from each department. We've just said, if you have interest in changing our software, if you have interest in relocation of our restore, join this task force and come along for the ride. And that has helped those folks who feel like they want to be involved, but they are also, at the end, we're talking about a cascading message. What are we taking out of here today about this meeting today that you can share with your teams to calm down this fear about whatever's happening? And things that we as leaders held so close to our chest are now being solved by the entire organization. And so it really has helped. It hasn't alleviated it, but it has helped people focus on, I can still see this big thing around collaboration, but I see you're taking bite-sized chunks of it every quarter. And so I don't think there's any happy medium. Your finance people want to know something different than your fund development people, than your construction staff, right? But I think that it's spending time making sure that everyone at least knows their place in that change and how they will be part of it. So, yeah.
Thank you, Bev. Jamie or Fumble, do you want to add anything to that one before we ask the next?
I don't think I could add anything. But I just want to highlight what I heard Bev say too, that I never learned until going through Transform about building your dark army or the team or who's on that. And I love the way she talked about, like, asking for volunteers and being really clear on what they do, but trying to identify the ones that are late adopters, or the ones that don't very traditional and need a lot of time. Maybe those are the ones that need to be on that team. And so then they experience that slow progression of like, okay, this is a new reality as a part of that collaboration team, and trust your like the early adopters and the I forget the term, but the people that can react to change well. Maybe they can stay a little bit more on the outside and then take it and run with it once it's ready for the masses. So yeah, that's what was kind of going through my mind as Bev was speaking.
I'll give a quick add-on. So I think I mentioned earlier, like project management software. I think having systems in place to organize the big stuff is important because you need to have those answers. And so I think to be able to visually show people that there is a plan, right? And I think to identify, break down in that who is responsible for what parts of that plan. So I think to have a big picture map that people can look at and go, oh, there's the big picture, and you've got a process for the details, but you don't have to get into that with everybody. And as they get into their individual parts of the pie, they see that you have a plan for the details. And so I think that builds trust in them. But I also, I saw another question that I think gets into like differences in people. So I'll make this short, but I think that that's also connected to this. Some people need a lot more information, others don't. So I think if you kind of paint the big picture and allow people to see the vision and it's really clear, you can dig into different levels of detail with different groups and or individuals.
Jamie, that's a beautiful tie into this next question from Natalie. When you talk about some people needing more information, some people needing more processing time, less processing time. So Natalie asks, how do you build trust with those within your span of care from an individual and team perspective when there are so many different express needs, personalities, and lenses that they view the organization and yourself? And then if you have capacity for the follow-on, it's also, would that information change when you are looking at both the short and long-term impact?
Oof.
I mean, I'll continue my answer. I think that's part of the science of all this, right? It's the art, maybe I use science, but the art of all this. I think that's part of what we do when we go through listens and serves and transforms is it goes back to that base idea of that awareness of ourselves and awareness of the people around us, because there's so many things that tie into the behaviors that we see in people every day. And so I think in your question, we're really getting into, as we navigate trust, we're needing to understand the differences in people to do that well. And I think one of the things that you're in your question, you're communicating the challenge with that. It can be mind-boggling. And so I think what I found, I'll give a quick, one of the things I found is to focus on some of the basic stuff. Like, I think there's a lot you learn in Listen, Serves, and Transforms, but what's really amazing is how some of the foundational things have such a big impact on people's behavior. So when we look, there's a chart that talks about ask, tell, people, task, and it sounds very basic, but that chart, you can really get a lot of insights to people from just that chart. And so I'm just saying, don't overlook the basics of human behavior and the things we know about each other, and then try to apply those into how we work together to create change.
And man, my one-on-one meetings with my team are remarkably different. And so I've got a social worker here that, the first 20 minutes is all that. And so if I don't look at how that impacts her relationship with me and building trust, if I'm treating every direct reporter individual the same, then the long-term impact will be that we have no connection, that we don't understand, and that I know the strengths and weaknesses. So if you to my office and want me to solve a problem, the first thing I'll say is, make sure you really want me to solve that problem, because I'm going to go way into the weeds and I'm going to find 5 other problems. And that's probably not what you want to have happen today. And then I'm going to find all those problems and then I'm going to walk away, because details to me are like, that's not who I am. Right. And so, but then there are times when you walk in and you're just exasperated and you just want an answer. And so I think it's just knowing how folks process different and saying, how about you just walk away today and let's think about this for a little bit? Or, I think maybe we have too much emotion tied in this issue today, and let's like uncover that. But like, every conversation you have today is a long-term impact. I really feel strongly that when I came 5 years ago, I oftentimes heard, we're not really sure why you're here. And, that can be taken a million different ways. But I knew. And so it was just developing relationships, but they have to be to the person and their needs. They cannot be like to your needs, because for me, it's about the organization. It's not about Bev.
Any additional thoughts on that one?
I'm sorry, was that to me?
Yeah, Fumble, if you've got some thoughts.
So it's funny, and I don't mean it jokingly, but when I first heard you read Natalie's question, my answer was yes. And I think Bev and Jamie both hit on it, that you do have to practice all those skills. And the one thing that I would add was that, in the group context, like, I think they made it really clear on the one-on-one piece, but in groups, that concept of a psychologically safe space where you can have a group meeting or a working group, and that independent of their personality, if you will, that you can still get the message across and receive the messages and and be challenged on it. And I found that very difficult to do, but that's where I would also go there. Like, okay, I really do need you all in the same room, even though they're going to react to it differently. But I think there's some tools out there to explore doing that in a group meeting.
All right, while we wait to see if any additional questions come into the chat, I do want to just call out that you must have really modeled well today, because Cam wanted to put in the chat that he would do a trust fall with any of you three any day.
Nice, nice.
Thanks, Cam.
I should open it up to you three as well, as you've had a chance to hear a little bit more from each other. Any additional thoughts that you'd want to share individually, or questions for someone else on the call?
One of the loose thoughts rolling around on my brain pan floor a little bit earlier was that it's a people business, and of all the different businesses that me, Bev, and Jamie are involved in, and all the listeners, really, once you're at this level of leadership, it's all about the people, and then they go and conduct the business with your help. And so it sounds like a lot as we talk about these, and it really is. It's like a full-time job just to manage people. So that's just a thought to put out there, that if you're not busy at work just taking care of other people, then like there's an opportunity to be a better leader.
Thank you, Fumble.
When I think too, every day is a different day, right? And so when you don't use the FBI, when you don't use effective listening, when you throw somebody in the box and you don't help them out, when you don't handle confrontation the way that you feel like you should, give yourself a break, right? And just know that you're doing the best that you can. And that I think as leaders, when we ask folks to help us, so, hey, when I do this thing, let me know, it's a huge trust builder. So I think, we carry a lot of weight on our shoulders that sometimes, what is it? We got to get the monkey off our back, because sometimes it's not ours to own. So.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting is, in that we talked about the behaviors, the management behaviors earlier, one of those is showing vulnerability. And I think, Bev, when you talked about that idea of not being able to be, not having to be perfect as leaders or anybody else in the organization, I think that's important, that we kind of put that humanness element into the mix of that. We're going to work hard to be mutually accountable to each other and give each other our best, but there's going to be times, we are going to fail, right? We are going to have days where it doesn't go the way we wanted it to, or projects or whatever it is. And so I think making sure that that's part of that culture, right? Of where we give each other kind of grace and space to not be perfect, and doesn't mean that we just go, well, it is what it is, but we work to be our best, but we care and support each other when it's not. And I think too, just that idea of working together as a team, to carry out, it's a team effort. So it's, I think you guys, one of the things that I wanted to kind of share a little bit on a separate note was a book that's been very helpful to me by Charles Feltman. And it's a book called The Thin Book of Trust. And it breaks trust into 4 categories: care, sincerity, reliability, and competence. And the article that we read when we went through Transforms was amazing too. The neuroscience of trust, and the idea of understanding that, like our brains, actually, there's brain research that says, like, when we do these behaviors, our brains are putting out oxytocin. It's a positive thing when we do these behaviors connected to trust. So, but I think just starting to really understand trust, one of the things that kind of hit me in that Feltman book was the idea that care is of the 4, care is a bigger percentage. And it kind of surprised me. The idea that when we care for people that we're building trust, and how do we do that? And then also the idea of reliability, that when we talk about being reliable, communication is a huge part of that. And so when we talk about all this stuff in listens and serves and transforms, it's geared around communication. And so a big part of being able to build trust is communicating effectively. So it was that book was super helpful to me. So if anyone's looking for a quick, easy read, that's a great one.
Thank you, Jamie. And as we wrap up, I would encourage Bev, Jamie, Fumble, and anyone else on this call who has also found some other resources that were really beneficial in this topic that you want to drop in the chat for everyone. I know that a lot of what you've heard referenced today, some of you who are alumni were like, oh yes, the reminder of being in the box and FBI. And if you have not taken the courses, might feel like I have no idea what they're talking about. And so I do just kind of want to acknowledge that the recordings that we had dropped in the chat at the beginning will have some of those explanations of, especially the term of how do people process change and putting people in the box when we're asking them to change, and how we as leaders can show up well in that space. But when you look at all three of the foundational courses together that have been referenced throughout the day, just want a reminder that this is really the focus of, as they mentioned, focusing on me first. How are we erasing the emotional intelligence of ourselves as leaders, but also the people in our span of care? And then how do we navigate moving from all this knowledge we know about me to having a we-centric mindset and we-centric behaviors that we're exhibiting at work, which carries over into the home and our communities? And then ultimately in Transforms, where we talk about us. How do we start really working at building better workplaces where people feel seen, valued, and cared for? So as a next step, as we wrap up, just a reminder that you'll be getting an email at the end of this. It will have those recording links again and an opportunity to complete a survey so we can hear from you on how did you like the panel discussion? What would you like to see more of next time? And I just want to end with deep gratitude for Bev and Jamie and Fumble for joining us today. I continue to learn so much from all three of you, and I know you have a lot of people in your care, and the fact that you took time to be here with us is greatly appreciated.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. We ended right at the top of the hour. I hope you have a great day.